sometime around Wednesday, and I'll do the dance on Wednesday, we'll be halfway to spring break. We'll be 50% of spring break. We'll be 1/4 of the semester over. Wow, that's
Can you give us a preview of what the dance is going to look
it. Always looks like this. Come on, you get it.
I'm just checking.
Get the hips on line.
Exactly.
There you go. On Friday, we started talking a little bit about the topics inside the text. Again, this is a suggested text. You do not need to purchase it. If you do happen to find it and you're walking around some bookseller and you go, oh, look at that, there it is for free, and you want to pick it up, that's hooray. You don't need it. I think it's a pretty cool book. It is not a textbook. It does not have chapters and exercises and homework and tests and labs in it. But it is stuff that we're talking about, and we already have been talking about the concepts in this book all semester. And for those of you who have joined us earlier than now, maybe as early as last fall, in the physics class, we were still talking about this stuff with inputs and outputs and process and the like. So you can't help but avoid what's in here because we're ISBT majors, and it's sort of a foundational concept of what we're talking about. On Friday, we started talking about specifically the chapters inside this text. I just threw that up there, so in case you want to take a look at it, this is the same link that I'm using to this Prezi on the topic. And we did get through a majority of the content until the last part. So I want to finish up talking about that. Push this button over here. Fantastic. It's already there. Wonderful. So yeah, systems philosophy just happens to be the first part of this book, talking about how we go about thinking about systems. Philosophy, of course, is the philo, is just like Philadelphia, it's the love of stuff. This is the love of knowledge, the love of how to learn. And this is our book. That's, again, it's in its 3rd edition. I have a copy of the 2nd edition. I have a copy of the 1st edition somewhere. It must have gotten buried. But I stopped, after getting a hold of the 2nd edition, I realized that the primary update was some case studies they had in the back of the book. The primary thinking and thoughts are foundationally the same, so any edition will probably work. So these are the 5 things that we talked about on Friday. We just started naming what this shift of paradigm was, and I wanted to mention that. But as is always the case, whenever you're reviewing for an exam or sort of learning something for the first time, sometimes recapping what you've already talked about is good for your brain to say, yeah, I get that, I see how this fits in, I'll move on. So this imitation thing, the way this fits inside our systems thinking, and again, this is specifically talking about designing businesses or talking about how we do things innovation-wise. Imitation is a pretty big thing inside businesses and innovation. If someone's coming out with a new product, usually it may be for a business reason, for you want to make money, you want to capitalize on the market, you want to beat your competitors, or it could be non-business. It could just be solving a really hard problem, like enough fresh water around the world or enough food to feed everybody. If somebody has a really great solution, then what normally happens, even among scientists, is, hey, did you hear about this lab over in pick a country, pick a lab? They've just made this discovery, and we think that if we do it sort of that way, we think they're on to something. That's the phrase. So lots and lots of other laboratories and business folks and organizations will jump on that, not because everybody, me too, me too, me too, but we've been doing science for a few thousand years as a civilization, recorded history-wise, and we still don't have flying cars. We still do not have a medicine that cures every disease. We still have not eradicated hunger and fresh water around the world. There are still some major problems to be solved. So anytime somebody makes a good decision or a good discovery going in the right direction, other people want to follow. So that's what this imitation is all about. It's not just nefarious. It's not someone trying to make a knockoff laptop and copy Apple or a knockoff handbag. So this idea of imitation is actually a pretty good thing if someone has discovered how to do it correctly, like eating right or sleeping correctly or has their life together. You want to imitate them. They'll even write a book so that other people can imitate what they do. We talked very quickly about this imitation product from Caterpillar, and Caterpillar was really, really concerned. They said, how did this imitation product, this other company that made the same style bulldozer that was capable of moving the same amount of dirt, how could they possibly sell it for 40% less the price? So if it was a $100,000 bulldozer, that sounds kind of cheap. They only charged $60,000. They're like, why? How did that happen? And after analyzing it, they found out that the competitor saw all the cool inventions that the Caterpillar people were making on their own tractor, but Caterpillar, rather than starting from the beginning, they just added extra things on. Made it very complex, very expensive, very difficult to maintain and build, whereas these guys just started over. So again, this is just me, not the book. The lesson learned is start from scratch rather than patch whenever you're designing something. Maybe you've already had this discussion with Dr. Jones or with Marcia. Does anybody know what department ISBT was birthed out of? So what department was ISBT before we changed into the ISBT program? She did indeed work in the chemistry department. She was chair of the chemistry department, but the chemistry department is still here. So the chemistry department didn't shift over before ISBT. Does anybody know what ISBT used to be before it became ISBT? What major did we redesign and say, we're calling ourselves ISBT now?
Science.
It's a trick question, right? Nobody. We started with, Dr. Jones, myself, and Marcia, we started with a blank paper and said, if we were to design a brand new 4-year major that was really awesome, what would it look like? And we started from nothing. We just said, let's just start designing. So we started fresh. We didn't take an existing department or an existing failing department or an existing department that was looking to change and then make it the same thing. We just went, exists. We just created it out of nothing. And off we go. So following the same things here, whenever you're innovating, sometimes even though the innovation appears to be the next step, sometimes it's best to just use all the metaphors you want. Wipe the slate clean and go to back to the drawing board and start from scratch. Sometimes it's better than doing that rather than just putting a fix on something. This inertia, again, a physics word. Inertia is once something, especially something that has lots of mass, gets moving and gets moving in a certain direction. We saw a lot of inertia yesterday if you watched the Super Bowl. Here comes our running back, and here comes, I get my positions right, a linebacker wants to tackle this person. It takes a lot of energy to stop the running back from going forward or to tackle them and move them sideways. A lot of energy because they have inertia once they get going. Same thing with companies, especially when it comes to new inventions and new innovations, something we always talk about. If you are a very inventive or innovative company, you want to make sure that you do not get into this rut of having a lot of inventive inertia, where you're constantly doing the same thing over and over and over again. Every once in a while, you need to be sensitive to the fact that you need to change direction. So again, sort of a lesson learned. We talked about the Continental Can Company, fantastic company. They were very, very big, almost 50% of all the cans, and then the technology changed. So the lesson learned is to embrace new technology, which is why companies, successful companies, in addition to having all the things that companies have, production and safety and accounting department and accounts receivable and OSHA, they also have research and development because they're constantly thinking of new ways to do it. We talked about sub-optimization. Sometimes coming up with a new innovation or a new invention is earth-shattering and groundbreaking. No one has done it before. It's pretty impressive. In the case of Apple, with the iPhone, it may define an entire new genre of products. But then the problem is just sticking and making it better and better and better, especially if that better and better makes it more expensive and you can't really perceive that it's better, that could be a bad thing. And I just have some examples, not picking on Apple. Did anybody pick on Tim Cook? Yes? Did you see where Tim Cook got slammed? He ran out into the field and took a picture with his iPhone 6, and apparently it's blurry, and everybody's yelling at him. He couldn't help, I guess. I'm not sure. Anyway, so we did pick on Apple a little bit and talk about all these products. And, oh my gosh, let's go through all this. So to the user, it may look like the product has not changed that much. Of course, it's just the case. gotten a little bit bigger. The screen's gotten brighter. It definitely has more stuff inside of it, more memory, better cell phones and the like. But sometimes that can be considered being stuck in a rut. Okay, and yeah, we make fun of it. Fantastic. So often, whenever you're making a new product or a new idea, sometimes it's just enough to get the job done and then move on. It doesn't need to be perfect. There's a lot of phrases like that where perfection is the enemy of just good enough. It's good enough. Let's go. Let's send it out. The change of game. This also comes back to very inventive companies. Companies are constantly trying to solve their own problems and then solve society's problems. Again, fresh water, enough electricity, enough power, internet access. You guys, yes, sir? Is this mine? Is this somebody's? It is. Thank you very much. It's changed. Where do you go? There's James. Is this you? Fantastic. Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Chickaway. That's ice cream. In the case of change of game, we're constantly trying to solve problems. Again, my little soliloquy was our own problems, other people's problems. Once a problem is solved, then move on. Take yes for an answer. Okay? Oh, look, we solved that. We solved that 5 years ago. Now we've moved on. We do things differently now. This idea of change of game, another business speak thing, as soon as companies start inventing things, come up with an invention that works, then everybody starts solving different problems, or the next problem, or the next most pressing problem. You should not, again, inertia-wise, get stuck solving the same thing. One of the things we keep on talking about is this Henry Ford thing, when Mercedes-Benz invented the horseless carriage. They invented the automobile. They had steam automobiles, and eventually they had gasoline engines automobiles and diesel engine automobiles. The idea was people started wanting them. Like, oh, that's pretty cool. I want one. How do I get one? Same thing with Sony. Has anybody ever? Come on, admit it. Anybody stand in line for a new PS2 or PS3? No, no one. Just no one's done that. I haven't. I did like midnight releases of like the Harry Potter books. That's about it. But the people would show up at Best Buy. They'd only have 5 or 6 PS3s, PS4s. And people would go, "Where are they? Like, we can't make them fast enough." It was a production problem. Same thing happened with cars. Back when people started buying automobiles, we just didn't have manufacturing class. We didn't have Detroit yet. So the question was, how in the world can we make them fast enough? Henry Ford solved that by inventing or perfecting or using this idea of making this huge assembly line. He had, in his heyday, I think he had 70,000 employees. It was huge.
Question. So when he made the cars, did we have gas stations, or did we have to fill the
Bingo. Yeah. So as more cars showed up, then more gas stations showed up.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Question: why do they advertise something so much, and then when they release it, they don't have enough, and it sells out super quickly?
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's such a job advertising.
I'm sorry, what? No, go ahead.
They did such a good job advertising.
So one, they didn't expect the advertising to be that good. Or two, you can nefariously think that they just didn't know how good of a product they had in their hands. The other thing is, they did it on purpose. So another flavor of advertising is to advertise a little bit, let the word of mouth, and then let everybody, especially with social media, tweeting about, I can't get it. Did you see it? So-and-so got one. And just completely get the buzz going, and you get free advertising. So I'm not suggesting that every company is that intelligent. Sometimes it's just dumb luck that happens, but some of them are that intelligent. So yeah, what are you going to do? Turns out that car production has such a big impact on what we did the last century, the 20th century. In some of the other courses in the ISBT higher level courses, we talk about Ford and we talk about General Motors. We talk about Chrysler. I'll bring it in here. The big thing about this is this change of game. As soon as Henry Ford invented or developed how to make enough cars, the problem was his giant factory was really just a giant robot. It had people involved, but it was a giant robot. It could only make one car. It could make the Model T, and there was no options. They didn't have 28-inch rims. It just didn't happen. And you couldn't even get a red one. It all came in black. So the idea was that this very famous quote from Henry Ford is they can have any colors they want as long as it's black. There was zero idea of giving customers what they want because they had no capability of doing that. So then the game became, how do we give the customers what we want? And it turned out that General Motors is one of the companies who did that. And then what they did was they invented this thing called the idea of planned obsolescence. Have you guys covered that in marketing your business? So when a product becomes obsolete, you have to buy another version of it. So the folks at General Motors back in the 20s and the 30s, they invented this idea, this scheme, nefarious scheme, called planned obsolescence. And what they would do is, just like fashion, they merged the idea of wearing the correct fashion to driving the correct fashion. So that's back in the 30s and 40s, 50s. These cars, these big fins in the back, and they look like submarines, then they look like airplanes. So they walk by and go, "Oh, you're driving that last year's car. That's too bad. You don't have this year's car. My car's nicer." So people would sell that as used to buy a new one. So actually, this idea of let's change it so often and let's change it every year, so that people will generate requirements for it. So yeah, that's actually a pain. Well, they'll update it just for the sake of updating it. So the clock will go around and go, ding, it's the next model year. You have to buy the next model year because it's better, even though it's exactly the same product. They just changed the color. So for innovators like us, and we profess to be innovators, and we are, you could spend 10, 20, 30 years. You could spend an entire career solving a problem, and if it's a big enough problem that you want to retire on because you got a great reward for it, hooray. But as a company, you have to move on. You have to solve the next problem. So change a game is a pitfall for a company who, after solving a great problem, they refuse to move on. They just think that doing the same thing over and over again is going to help them. And it's not because the game has changed. Okay? This is where we ended up on Friday. This is where we'll spend some time. Very much an MBA, Masters of Business Administration, an MBA level phrase, shift of paradigm. A paradigm is how you view things. So when we started talking, has it only been 3 weeks ago? When we started talking about electronics as stupid balloons and straws, that's a paradigm. Okay, that's a way to view things. Let's look at batteries as a high pressure balloon filled with air, and straws moving the air. And let's talk about batteries and wires the same way. It's one way to think about it. It's like an analogy. That's sort of the same way. That's sort of the same flavor of what a paradigm is. It's a way to look at things. So there are 3 paradigms that we're going to be talking about all semester. So don't worry about getting them memorized. They'll just be oozing out of your pores. First is this nature of reality. This is what's really going on. What type of system are we talking about? We've already talked about natural systems and human-made systems. We talked about open and closed systems and dynamic and static. In this case, we're talking about 3 different paradigms, 3 different models of how systems behave, how they work. The simplest one, and this is the one that we've been working with, is the machine model. It's just a machine. And to really add a little bit more flavor to it, it's a mindless machine. So yes, this starts us talking about artificial intelligence in higher level courses, but for now, my little tiny clicker right here, which has, oh, I'm sorry, did I do that? My little clicker over here that has what did I do to it? Did I make it go away? I'm back. I didn't even know I could do that. I could do that with this phone. It has batteries in the back, so this thing requires energy, and as far as I know, if I don't touch it, it won't control the presentation. I have to press the buttons. And when I press the buttons and I go backwards, it responds. And when I press it forwards, it responds. So it's a machine. It does what I ask it to, but it doesn't have a mind of its own. That's where that phrase comes. It's mindless. Okay. So one way to view individual products like my cell phone or my clicker is that it is a mindless machine. That's also a way to view companies. Companies can be run as mindless machines. Trying to give an example of some things. Sports teams, again, coming off of the Super Bowl, regardless of a team sport where different humans play different positions. I'll pick baseball because I'm looking for spring training soon. If you're a human, we know you're a human. We'll have lovely conversations. You probably play the piano. You like to go to movies. You have desires, and you're hungry, and you're hot. Fantastic. If you're a pitcher, you're a pitcher, and you're supposed to behave the way a pitcher plays. Same thing if you play first baseman, and we call you a first baseman, during the game, you're supposed to act as if you were a first baseman. You're not supposed to have a brain and solve problems. You're just supposed to react the way a first baseman does. That's this mindless machine model. Sometimes businesses are run as if the people are just robots. Sometimes I have this stance, and I have this stance. This is me taking my arm, and maybe I have a screwdriver, and I spend all day on the assembly line putting this one screw in. That's not very fun. I hope I get paid a lot of money. I hope I get my carpal tunnel syndrome paid for, because my arm's going to give out eventually. I don't want to do this for 30 years. I don't want to take the same screw and screw it in. That's a robot job. I'm not suggesting it's not a good job, and people who have that job aren't fantastic people. It's just that when companies view their employees as mindless machines, there's usually a reason why people will agree to be treated like a machine, and usually it's because the benefits and the pay is really, really good, or it's your first job, or you're young. Like, okay, I'm going to drive this forklift, or I'm going to stand here on this assembly line and put this screw in. The same thing. Maybe I'll change my job. There's a lot more to talk about that. That's the mindless machine model. Uniminded biological model. Why do they call it a biological model? Is because in mammals, we like to think that animals have a single brain. I think unless we talk about multiple sections of the brain, you got to do all kinds of brain stuff. A uniminded biological model of a business or a system is that the brain or the central nervous system is in charge, and all the other parts, they just follow the commands of the brain. And pretty much that's where we're sort of stuck in 2015, 2016. Salle University, where's the brain of Salle University? You guys have brains, right? You're students. Are you part of LaSalle? But where's the brain? Where's the brain?
There's not a brain.
Organizationally, we have a brain.
Is our head?
I love that word. You use the word head, right?
President.
The president. The president is our brain, okay? Now, Colleen's fantastic, and she's a very smart human being, but she's just one person. But organizationally, she's the president, okay? How about the United States of America? Where's our brain?
Oh, president.
The president. Okay, so we use that term, okay? Another society that has a king or a queen, that's the brain, okay? That's a very biological model. That's either there is a single person. We like to think that Dr. Hanich and she's very enlightened, and she has a bunch of senior advisors that advise her. We call it administration at LaSalle. We have different vice presidents and different directors. But that's sort of the idea of this uniminded biological model, and lots of companies still run that way today. They treat the company as if it is a biological organism that has administration and very smart people being the brain of the company, and then everybody else is just workers, and they do what they're told. Okay? And then we run into this. This really has different meaning now because we have so many social networks. Realize that this book was originally written in 1999. Facebook wasn't invented and shown up until 2004. So it's 5 years before Facebook. 5 years before we start talking about social networks. That's this guy. Multi-minded social model. This is a business or an organization that is organized such that, up one leg, you and me and the students and the administration, everybody has a brain and everybody's working together. Okay? So you go ahead and you think about things team approach and do things rather than worrying about no minds at all. It's just a machine. Just play your position and don't ask questions. Uniminded is, well, I better ask my boss. My boss will know. I better ask the president. Let's let the president decide. I don't have enough authority to make any decisions. And this is, well, hell, let me solve it. So the thought is that all three of these things are legitimate ways to organize things, but it's already sort of baked into this an idea of as you go down, it's more complex system and maybe better. So we're going to be talking about those three things all semester. The last two, also a shift in paradigm, and that's the box. If we start drawing systems, do we spend a lot of time inside the box, or do we spend a lot of time thinking about how the box is connected to its environment? So an analytical approach, when you analyze things, we're on the third floor. Gavin just came around literally with a cart full of cats. Do you know what the cats are being used for at LaSalle in the spring semester? In anatomy and physiology, they get a cat about this week in February, and they get the same cat through April. And they just keep on going deeper and deeper and dissecting it further and further and further and further. That's their project for the semester. It's a very analytical approach. That's looking to the inside. A systems approach is looking to the outside. Usually a systems approach, you look at something as it is alive and working with its environment. Okay? So I always exaggerate and say analytical is just stabbing whatever you have and taking it apart. That's usually what a scientist is supposed to do. The systems approach is a more ecological study approach. Let the organism live and let's see how it lives in its environment. These are the 5 things we're going to be talking about all semester. A couple more words. Mindless system, it really is a robot. It's a mechanistic view, like the transmission on a bicycle. Bicycle has a chain, it has pedals, it has a shifter, but it does what the bicycle doesn't drive itself. It just does what it needs to do. It is the basis of the Industrial Revolution last century. It is the basis of Henry Ford. Machines replace unskilled farmers. So all of a sudden, instead of being out, what do you do? What did you do all day? Well, as soon as the sun came up, and then the sun went down, I took this hoe and I got all the weeds out of the garden. And we had to feed ourselves as a society. And then, Industrial Revolution-wise, we started inventing a whole bunch of different machines. So we started inventing tractors and combines and mechanical farm instruments. So all of a sudden, these machines replaced farmers, people, and then it turns out that organizations, large factories, thought about the same thing. Rather than having very, very skilled craftspersons, a master blacksmith, or a master cooper making barrels, or a master person making shoes, now we can build machines to make those same things. And the machines work a lot, and the machines don't complain, and the machines don't wear out. When they do, we just replace them. Okay? But if you're a human working at that machine or operating that machine, you're expected to be a robot. You're expected to just push the button. Okay, this is the machine I use. It opens up. I take out this piece, put it over here on the done pile, grab the new piece, put it in there, get my hands out of the way, push these 2 buttons, stamp it, and then do that. And I do that all day. There's nothing wrong with that work. I'm not suggesting that people who do that work aren't awesome. It's just I wouldn't want to do that job. It gets pretty boring pretty quick because you're being hired as a robot. Okay. So in this case, the organization is a mindless machine with no purpose of its own. It just works. A bicycle just works as far as we know. Okay. So the lesson learned on mindless systems, and this is something that was newer than just having a bunch of people saying, you take care of building the houses, and you take care of farming, you take care of fishing, and you take care of making clothes. Now we actually started building machines that do that. So now we can build machines and we can use people to do the intricate work the machines aren't smart enough to do. That's sort of changing in 2016. Our machines are getting smarter. Lots and lots of discussion of machines displacing people, because now we can build industrial robots with hands to do the parts people used to do. Uniminded systems. It's a biological view. The system is alive. In this case, the reason why we built this machine, or we built this, we even used the word plant. Where do you work? I go down to the plant to work. A plant like growing with a seed. We even call Marcia is our entrepreneur. She talks about seed capital or seed funding, where you go ahead and you give a business who's very, very small, a new business, you give it money to grow. We use this term all the time when talking about growing businesses. So the reason why we analyze a business to see how much sales have grown this year, or how much sales have grown over the past 5 years, we treat it as if it's a plan. In this case, we give it a brain, the president or the board of advisors, or somebody who's in charge. They can act in the best interest of the organization. And, oh, by the way, the entire organization only has one brain, but it's living, and it can now react to its environment. So now changing environments can be responded to by the organization. Different organs in the body, livers and stomachs and skin, they're all organs. We use the term organization. So if it's raining like hell outside and my bike is outside, it's going to rust. My bike does not know to come in out of the rain because my bike's not very smart. We may have a smart bike in the future that actually has a brain, an electronic brain, not there yet. However, my German Shepherd, she enjoys being wet, but not wet and cold. So if she's outside and it starts to rain, and I don't know it's rain, she's going to get pissed off and want to come back in. She's a biological organization. She knows that being outside in the rain in February, it sucks. She wants to come back in. So she has a mind, and she can react to the environment like a bicycle can. It'll just get rusty. Okay? So in this case, top-level management is the brain, and all body parts follow orders. The idea is if management tells you what to do, then you don't go rogue and do it whatever you want. You can do exactly what management asks you to do. Now we get this sticky, multi-minded system. This touchy-feely stuff. More MBA-level words. Socio-cultural. Society and culture. A different organization now has a particular corporate culture. Well, we don't do that here at Frito-Lay. Maybe over there at Left Twix we do that, but at Right Twix we do it this way. Okay? You have a different corporate culture, and we also do society-wise, so they call it socio-cultural. In this case, the organization is a voluntary association of purposeful members. Boy, does this sound like MBA level speak, because it is. Instead of being a machine where the pedals and the chain and the sprockets of my bicycle have no choice but to be where I've bolted them, or in the case of a organization where do your job or the boss is going to get upset and you're going to get in trouble, a sociocultural view is, hey guys, let's do this. Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, but we're going to need you to not have lunch for the next year. You're going to need to skip lunch for the next year. Screw that. I'm out of here. Okay. That's a voluntary association. That's not indentured servitude. Okay. You're allowed to quit. In the United States, we have work rules that allow you to quit. But now we're talking about more of a club. You have to be more aware of how the system is organized. If you make it too nasty for your members, they'll all quit. They'll all go away because it's a voluntary organization. Typically, the members of the organization have a purpose. Sometimes the purpose is, I need to make the money. That's fine. Sometimes I want to be associated with this club because I want to be discovered as a musician. So I'm going to go ahead and write a few songs for you guys, and maybe someday I'll get a top 10 song out there. So different members have different reasons for showing up. It's very, very complex quickly, which is what the book talks about. In the case of mechanical system, in the case of the bicycle example, it's considered energy bonded. That means the different parts, inputs and outputs. We talked about energy systems, we talked about material systems, we talked about information systems. In the case of a mechanical system, it's usually energy bonded. So I push down on the pedal of my feet. I push down the pedal of my bicycle and the wheel turns. It has no choice unless it's broken. So that's energy bonded. However, in the case of sociocultural, it's information bonded. So the idea is, the example the book likes to use is not a person riding a bicycle, but an equestrian riding a horse. And the idea is the equestrian riding the horse, simply when you pull the reins or you pinch with your feet or you do some sound, whatever, you are asking the horse. Anybody ride a horse? Some people do. Yeah? When you ride a horse, you ask the horse to do stuff?
No.
No, you tell the horse.
Yeah.
What happens if the horse doesn't respond? Does the horse get in trouble?
Yeah.
Okay. Sociocultural systems, even with the horse information bonded, the rider and the horse do not run into the wall, as opposed to the driver of a bicycle who's not paying attention, or a car driver who's not paying attention and on their cell phone. They're going to run into the wall, okay? Because the car doesn't know any better. It's crazy. It's when this was written in 1999, that was true. In 2016, it started to change. Our cars are starting to get smart. Our cars are starting to get a brain. The car is supposed to pre-brake or alert you or do something and not allow you to run into a wall. The example the author uses is that, what about riding a horse? Will the horse be so trained that I don't care, I have to do exactly what my rider says, and the horse runs into the wall? Or will the horse say, screw this, you're gone, and then off you go? The idea is, in an organization where there's lots of people involved, if the organization is metaphorically headed in the wrong direction and about to smash into a wall or dive off a cliff, the members of the organization can say something and say, yo, this is bad. Please listen to me. Okay? Mechanical system, energy bonded, sociocultural system, information system bonded. The lesson learned, as a society, sometimes the society helps the individual members. Fish swim in schools for protection, for everything else. Humans live in tribes. We call them differently now. We all live in tribes. For socialization, so that you plant the food and I'll go program the computer, and then together we'll come back and we'll have a cheeseburger. That's fine. I'll share my code with you. You share your cheeseburger with me. That's how we do as a society. We work as an information-bonded society rather than just a mechanical system. The other two things: analytical approach, looking inside, versus the systematic approach, the systems approach, looking to the outside. Analytical approach. There's always this idea, especially in movies, that if you give a child some mechanical part, those people who are destined to be scientists or engineers will take it apart. You know, where's Susie? She's back in the back taking apart my alarm clock again. Why? Because she takes everything apart. Okay. That again, that's the analytical view. Take the stapler apart and see how it works by having all the pieces in front of me. Oh, I see why that spring is there. That spring is there to push those staples towards the front. That makes sense. So you take things. I'm not getting my tools and take it apart. I'm just opening it up and looking inside. Dissect it into parts, analyze the process of individual parts, and determine the contribution of each part to the whole. This is the idea where you have all the parts laying around and saying, hey, how does this work? I'm not sure. The idea is the whole is simply the sum of its parts. If you can analyze the individual pieces, then you get a better idea of how the whole thing works. Okay? So the lesson learned here is look to the inside for answers. But of course, you guys already know, there's no surprise, we're a systems class. There's nothing wrong with the analytical approach. You guys will be fantastic scientists. Scientists look on the inside. And then on the outside, the systems approach, that's when, oh, by the way, the whole can be greater than the sum of the parts. It can also be less as well. It can be fantastically horrible, but it can also be fantastically good, depending on how these things actually put together. So as a systems approach person, we look at individual parts and see how they work together to solve a problem, as opposed to what parts do I have in front of me. Okay? Going back to a very, very horrible sports analogy, you can look at the roster. This is like fantasy football, fantasy baseball. You can see what positions and what players are involved, but just looking at what players are playing what position may not guarantee that you're going to have a winning or losing season. Usually it's how the players get together and train together and work together and like each other off the field and play as a group. In the United States, this is like the answer to every movie, every famous movie. War movies, Force 10 from Navarone, The Dirty Dozen, Bad News Bears. Tell me when I should stop. Any movie where you take a whole bunch of misfits And they're like, oh great, I have a whole bunch of ex-cons in my division where never do anything. And all of a sudden they all play well together. That's sort of a systems approach, where you go ahead and it depends on how well the coach allows the individuals to play together as a system. So in this case, if analytical is looking inside, outside is looking systems. So here's our guys. Shift paradigm, 2 directions. I just happen to have the 3 across the top as columns and 2 down the side as rows. And if I do my math right, 3 times 2 is 6. There must be 6 individual ways that we can look at systems or we can look at organizations. It's a business book, so each of these examples are businesses or types of businesses. No one business is bad. However, the worst you can do is to think you're the best and that these other types don't exist. The best you can do is say, hey, guess what? There's lots of ways to do things, and let's go ahead and pick the best way to do things to solve this particular problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through these things. We're going to start with analytical, looking on the inside. We're going to look at examples of mindless machine, then biological system, then multi-minded social system. Okay? The example of analytical, look at the parts, mindless machine, it's not just this book. It's like every business book written in the 20th century is Henry Ford. Henry Ford, Henry Ford, Henry Ford. If you want a business and you have a factory and you want to make stuff, build an assembly line and start making stuff. Anybody ever hear of Foxconn over in China? Anybody know what Foxconn makes? I think they make all the iPhones. Foxconn does not exclusively make iPhones, but they are, I think they have 1 million employees. That's not an exaggeration. They have 1 million employees. They have a different society than we do, so they get in trouble every once in a while for hiring really, really young people and maybe not giving them a choice to go to work or not and paying them very little. There's really, really bad things. But they sort of have this in spades. Your job is to take the screen on the iPhone 6S and put it there and then move down the line. It's just cheaper to hire a young, unskilled, willing to take a couple cents a day worker than it is to build a very robust robot to do that. The robots are very expensive. So this is the interchangeability of parts and labor. If you find people who are willing to act like robots, it's a very convenient way to get things done. We're not memorizing this. Oh, by the way, why is Henry Ford so, well, he's famous because his car company is still around. We still have Ford cars. Why is he so celebrated as being a person? Back when a group of people would build a car from scratch and everybody worked on building the car like a kit, they built 2 cars a day. So the Henry Ford company built 2 cars a day. Once he built his factory, he could build 6,000 cars a day. Because individual people would, I'm in charge of the tire. I'm the steering wheel guy. I'm a windshield person. I'm a wiper person. Everybody was in charge of just doing one part. And they were able to build this giant assembly line. The problem solved was, how do I make 6,000 cars a day? The new problem created was, how do I make different styled cars each day? If everybody is building a different part of the car, then how the hell do we know what we're building? Everybody has to build exactly the same thing. So the problem is that large machines are difficult to operate and control. So we moved over to this how do you control individual people? You hire a president. You hire a manager. And you do all the bad things people say in movies. You get a bat, you start breaking knees. And that's really rough, right? You start being a person on a pirate ship with rowers, right? You bang, bang. You just tell everybody to work at the same time. So Alfred Sloan is the guy who's in charge of General Motors. He's the guy who was able to find out how to make different style cars. He invented planned obsolescence. He was able to make things we use today, budgets and forecasts. He invented a way or developed a way to control large organizations. As soon as he was able to do that, then the idea was, how does the organization with only one person at the top, one president, or a board of trustees or directors, how do they learn new things? There's only a very, very small number of people doing that. And then, oh, by the way, If people start to have a choice of how to do things, then you have this thing called conflict management. I want to do it this way. No, I want to do it this way. And you have to convince people to do things your way. Multi-minded social, but it's still analytical. It's called Participative Management. This is the idea where individual employees have a say. You put it in a suggestion box, and all of a sudden the employees can request changes. But you're still looking to the inside rather than the outside. What they solved now is need for individual expression. If anybody is, you guys are in, is anybody in here in Business 100? You guys reading mission statements? Will you be writing mission statements and business plans? That was this. That was invented by these guys. We need to have everybody say, mission statement, we're going to do it this way, and everybody's going to agree we're going to do it that way. Conflict management without oppressive rules and regulations, it can get really, really nasty if everybody has a choice. And then all of a sudden no one's doing the right thing. So we're almost finished. Couple more things. Systems. Now everything's going to work together. Okay? It's called joint optimization. Not surprisingly, the Ford Motor Company was part of this. This is still used today, used by the military, specifically the United States military. Why does it work? Because in the military, everybody has a certain number of rank on their shoulders or on their chest, and you follow orders and you do what you're told. Optimization-wise, it's a system, but all the players do exactly what they're told. Not because they're not smart, it's just that's what you do. And either we do what we're told, or we're all going to die. So everybody is supposed to act without making a decision. So the problem is, variables are independent and have a choice. If you're not in the military, if you're not required to follow orders, what do you do? That's this guy. Biological system, how to react quickly to changing environment. We're back to cars again. This was invented by Toyota, people who make the Toyota Camry and Corolla. They invented this system called the Toyota's lean production model. It allows you to react quickly to a changing environment, which cars to produce, which models to produce, how to change different options. And of course, we have one more to go, and you guys already know the answer to this, right? If there's only one more to go, and we're considering it the best, okay? So in this case, that's this book, Systems Thinking. Rather than reacting to changing environments, the idea is to be the person in front. Research and development like crazy, and lead the pack. Let everybody else follow behind you. We're going to be talking about this all semester. Individual members are now called stakeholders. Everybody's worried about doing a good job. They have to learn how to use what they already know. They have to learn how to realize what they don't know, and they have to learn how to learn what they need to know. It sounds like a lot of general stuff. I'm doing my job great, but I do better if I can learn differently. And then we do that here. And of course, commercial. That's us, okay? That's what we talk about. That's what we're talking about all semester. It's Monday. We have lab. 145. Lab is not this. Lab is electronics. We're going to be working with our systems again. However, we're going to be looking at electronic systems. We're going to look to the outside. We're going to build some very simple systems, but we're going to see how they behave today. We're going to change their environmental variables, how much voltage going in, how much current flying out, and then see how they behave. That's different from just building a circuit. It does exactly what it's supposed to do.
Okay. Is the president going to be on campus?
It is there now, yeah. That's how I got to this. So the president's there. Fantastic. much.